food, healthy plant-based food fit into this picture?
Yeah. So that's why what's called the infinite study. And what we wanted to see is how does food and nutrition education, because what we do know is that when treatment centers offer nutrition education to their patients, they do better. So we wanted people to gain the self-efficacy of knowing what they're doing for themselves. So it's a controlled trial. So individuals that enter the treatment study have the opportunity to either be a part of the treatment diet, which is a plant-based diet, or the control diet, which is the diet that's being served at the treatment center, which is an elevated Western diet. It's still meat, eggs, and dairy, but it's removal of a lot of processed foods and a lot of inflammatory oils. And, to be honest, when we looked at the diet, we're like, there's a lot of fruits and vegetables in this. And people who enter treatment are either overfed and undernourished or underfed and undernourished for a very specific reason. People who are dealing with end-stage substance abuse will always prioritize using over anything, and that includes food. And when food isn't a priority, healthy food sure is not a priority. And so what we're looking at is how does the different dietary protocols and the nutrition education change specific blood biomarkers. So obviously we're looking at lipid panels. We're looking at omega-3, which is an indication of brain health. We're looking at various vitamin levels. We're looking at how that relates to changes in your gut microbiome. So for listeners who aren't familiar with the gut microbiome is about 4 to 6 pounds of bacteria that exist within the gut of your body that do things for you that your body cannot do for itself. One of which is the creation of nutrients that cross the blood-brain barrier that are essential for the production of neurotransmitters. We've all heard that 90% of your serotonin and 50% of your dopamine are produced in the gut, and that's true, but those neurotransmitters don't cross the blood-brain barrier. But there is the creation of nutrient-specific short-chain fatty acids that do cross the blood-brain barrier that create the neurotransmitters within the brain. So it is very important.
Wait, so are you saying that it doesn't, what did that mean about the serotonin and the dopamine being made in the gut but not passing through the blood-brain? Does that mean that they don't affect our moods?
They do, in a sense that it allows for the communication of the brain to the gut. Right? Because you have the same neurotransmitters that exist in both. So that's the gut-brain axis that we talk about. The microbiome field is still very, very early in its in the investigation. What we're finding is some unbelievable things. And we thought for a while that, okay, that's where your dopamine and serotonin come from because so much that is produced there, it must enter the brain, but it doesn't. But what happens is neurotransmitter production is dependent upon the nutrient creation of a healthy gut microbiome. And just to put into an understanding of how impactful the gut microbiome actually is, Alexander, if I was to take you and I was to count all the cells that make up you, all the Alexandra cells, it would number roughly 10 trillion. There's 10 trillion Alexandra cells that I'm looking at right now. Within your gut microbiome, the cells of your gut microbiome number 300 trillion. So if I was to take all of the cells that exist within this wonderful human I'm looking at right now, you are less than 10% you in regards to the number of cells that make up this body. So it is an amazingly impactful thing. So we're looking at the changes in gut microbiome, how those changes relate to changes in blood biomarkers, and how both of them relate to changes in various validated scales of measuring emotional and psychological and mental health outcomes. Resiliency being our primary outcome that we're looking at. Resiliency is defined by an ability to be faced with an uncomfortable situation, move through it with grace and with positive change. We're using something called the Connor-Davidson Resiliency Scale, which is used to measure the effectiveness of PTSD treatment. We're also looking at self-compassion, looking at spiritual healing. We're looking at anxiety, depression, mania, obsessive compulsive drug use, and eating disorder scales. And what we are finding after the study has been going now, the participant part of the study has been running now for nearly 11 months. And what we're finding is that in every single measurable outcome, the plant-based group is doing better. Now, we haven't sequenced the microbiome yet. We're really excited about that. And we haven't done a full data analysis. But what's even greater than the quantitative data is the qualitative stories that we capture from the participants. Because I think what's so beautiful about humans is that we're storied creatures. Mm-hmm. I can take the majority of the population of the humans and give them all the data in the world and it won't move them an inch. But I give them a story of a human who has changed their life through something and they will never deny it. because you can't. And so we have these stories of these individuals who say, this is not my first, this is not my second, this is not my third time in treatment. And I was in the treatment group, and this felt different. There was a calmness that occurred. There was an ability to sit still and be with myself. It just felt different. And I went into it. Funny enough, we thought it was going to be difficult to get people into the treatment diet. But thanks to Game Changers, it's actually harder to get them in the control diet. So what we're finding is that I just wanted to be stronger. I wanted to be, I saw Game Changers. I thought I could, be better as fitter, because we have a lot of young people in treatment. And then they find this spiritual connection to the world around them, to the animals. And that's a big part, to feel connected. Like we talked about, meaningful connections and bonds. They see themselves as a part of it all rather than alone in the midst of all of it. Mm-hmm. And so
now, is that because, I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but do they feel more connected because of the nutrients in the diet, or is there any talk about the spirituality of a diet where you do not harm animals and that you're doing things better for the planet?
Yeah, so actually part of the protocol of the study is that we include the environmental aspect into it. We show a documentary like Cowspiracy, so that they understand that you may feel alone in this world, but you have a huge part to play, right? What you matter just by being alive. And one of the things that I find so important about people who struggle with substance abuse, myself included, is that when I was in the midst of it, I literally felt like I'd been forgotten by the world, that the universe was just requesting that I no longer be a part of it. And the things that we choose to believe have consequences on ourselves and the people that we love. And food, veganism, and this is not a vegan study, this is a nutrition study, but veganism for me helped remind me of the fact that I matter. I matter to myself, I matter to the people that love me, I matter to this world, that I can go outside and I can be connected to non-human animals in a way that allows me to connect greater to myself, because I've learned to love without condition. And when I can love others without condition, it gives me the permission to look at myself without condition. That loving your body is not about loving what it looks like, it's about loving what it does for you. And using food as a way for your body to show you how much more it can do for you today than it was able to do the day before is a constant reminder of how amazing this gift of being alive actually is, and what a gift all of our bodies are. The same thing with the self-love practice of loving yourself. Food is an act of self-love and self-care. For me, it was an affirmation of saying, I love myself so much that I believe myself worthy of eating this food, not when I reverse the disease, not when I lose the weight, but right now in this moment. And the reversal of disease was further confirmation that I've always been everything I've ever needed to be. I didn't have to become a sober person. I didn't have to become this new version of myself. Recovery is more a process of remembering who we've always been before somebody or something else told us differently and we believed it. And food enhances our ability to do that.
I want to talk about the food, stay on that for a minute, because I'm wondering about the evidence. In terms of animal-based diet versus plant-based diet. I mean, what are you considering to be the great differences from a perspective not only of nutrients, but within animal-based foods, the violence that could be filled in the animal cells, the hormones inherent in animal foods, of course, because they were living beings, so they're full of hormones, saturated fat. Those are just some of the possibilities, and I'm sure there are others. What are you looking at in terms of the actual evidence and understanding why there's such a difference between plant food and animal food?
So one of the factors that I think everybody knows about and everybody talks about is inflammation, right?
Sure.
So we know without a shadow of a doubt that the high sulfur containing amino acid content of animal products is highly inflammatory. You have a high degree of something called arachidonic acid, which is a negligent long-chain omega-6 fatty acid that causes inflammation. And when you have inflammatory nutrients in your blood, it's not just in your body, it's in your brain. And from epidemiological studies, we know that the greater the amount of arachidonic acid, the greater the incidences of neuroinflammation, which increase stress, anxiety, and depression. not at all saying they cause it, but they increase the symptom, the experience of it, which for an individual who has yet to gain that understanding that this is not an indication of failure, it's even more so overwhelming. So I like to say that food quiets the noise a bit. And people who are struggling, who are trying to recover, the world is really loud because there's so much being thrown at them. Yeah. There's so much that they're having to learn for the first time. Recovery is an act of like growing up for the first time for me. My substance abuse started when I was really young, and I think that my emotional maturity stopped at that point. So I had a lot of growing up to do. And growing up really quickly is a loud process. And food, the anti-inflammatory nature of it, the reduction of that neuroinflammation helped me to be able to sit calmly and still. Yes, there is absolutely the spiritual aspect of it, right? The knowing, like everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows what's happening on these slaughterhouse trucks. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows it, but and they say they know it. But what I love so much about what my brother Bobby Sud does is that he really highlights the fact that you just know of it. You don't actually know it. And so watching documentaries like Cowspiracy allows you to know of it a little bit more and to where you're almost knowing it. And then you can create a new relationship with your food and how it affects the world around you. And then you feel connected. And I think it's really important that we're seeing these changes that from a biochemical standpoint are great, but from an emotional and spiritual standpoint are really impactful and really powerful. And that, like I said before, I could show somebody all the data they want, but if I let them listen to this one person's story of trying to get sober 6 times, and then they adopt a plant-based diet and it feels differently, that will always resonate with somebody. That will always be enough for them to say, oh, I'll give it a shot, because I don't know what data, I don't know what arachidonic acid is. But
we do make changes based on experiences that people like us have.
Yeah.
And that's obviously already studied. And the other thing people can do is, if they want to, they can go with Bobby or Alexander to a vigil and just see their food on the way to their plate.
Absolutely.
I want to give a shout out to Bobby, actually, who has been documenting animal abuse for years now. And he's such a quiet, strong presence, unemotional, but passionate about it. So Bobby Sud, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.